Hey everyone, this is Josh from Solopreneur Grind for episode 79 of the Solopreneur Grind podcast. I'm here with Melvin, founder of Mellow Multimedia. Melvin, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Josh, for having me. I really appreciate being on the show. It looks so awesome from the past episodes I've listened so far. So I'm excited to be here.
Very cool. They're always exciting to me to hear another solopreneur or entrepreneur type story. Can you tell us a little bit more about you, what you're working on right now, and then of course we'll do a deep dive on how you got here.
Definitely. It's funny, man. I always get like these type of questions. I never know how to answer them just because it's like, who are you? Now start. It's so much to it, right?
It's a loaded question that we don't often take the time to think about too much.
Exactly.
But I did warn you you'd be getting this question ahead of time.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Definitely. So my name is Melvin Figueroa. I was originally born in Boston, Massachusetts, and then moved over in 2001 to Rhode Island. So I'm a Rhode Islander at heart. I recently moved to Florida, specifically in Melbourne. It was a really good startup scene happening here right now. I'm a father of two kids, an 11-year-old, 2-year-old. So I'm a family man at heart. Everything I do is for my family. I'm also a very devout Christian as well. That's another facet of my life. So it's all these things I'm juggling on top of being a entrepreneur as well once we get into the conversation. So that's a little bit of my backstory. But when it comes to professional part of my life, I've always been a creative person. I've always been that kid doodling in the back of tests or in the margins of notebooks when handing in homework. So I've always had that creative part of me always. And, from there, I kind of transitioned into like, what am I going to do now in high school? And in high school, I had a person that really believed in me. Was actually an advisor of mine. And he was telling me, if you got two choices here. You could be a starving artist and do fancy sculptures and paintings and doodles and all this stuff, or you can go into the more technical route of like graphic arts and working with machinery or just something that's more like applicable in an industry. So I had that tough conversation and I decided to take some college classes in high school because they offered it. So I thought to myself, why not? So I went ahead and I actually took classes at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, which is a really big art school in the area. A lot of international kids go there as well too. So it's like the Brown of the art schools, at least one of them. And I took some classes there. I learned like Photoshop, Illustrator, all the design programs. And I even took some drawing classes to kind of refine like my illustration skills while I was there. And I really just fell in love with graphic arts, which kind of fast forward led me to once I went to school and got a degree in multimedia, web, and design at New England Institute of Technology. I then started working at different firms and different art studios and different agencies as well. Anywhere from like print design to web design to making logos, I've done it all. And that's kind of what birthed Mellow Multimedia, hence the word multimedia, because I even did like animation, videography, photography. I definitely have my favorites out of those categories, which is web. Now that in 2020, I feel like web kind of leads the way when it comes to everything else. I tend to say that web is kind of like the dinner plate, right? And you can't really put anything on a dinner plate if you don't have a dinner plate, right? So yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of my backstory. I might be going a little too forward, but that's kind of where I'm at now. That's kind of what encompasses Melvin.
Very cool. And can you tell us a little bit more about where your head was at when you had that conversation with your advisor? Like, was that a big driver to where you are today, would you say?
Yeah, you can imagine being a high school kid, you kind of take it day by day, in high school as anyone would. But at some point you do kind of get to that point where you have to realize what are you going to do after high school, after basketball and soccer and all these things that you do after school and during school. And, I'm actually really grateful and thankful for that conversation that I had with my advisor at the time, because honestly, like you're saying, like I was a little hesitant. I just wanted to be a creative type. That's it. I didn't want to get all technical. I didn't want to work in a cubicle because I felt like if you started kind of taking away that creativeness, that organic creativeness, and kind of doing something more commercial, you kind of end up in a cubicle. So I thought. But the more I learned about it, taking those classes and kind of seeing the different careers that stem, and even the choices of even being an entrepreneur that can stem from those disciplines of like learning how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, it intrigued me more, and it kind of led me down the path of of maybe it's not as bad as I thought, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. So you decide to go down that path for school, and then when you graduated, and
Hmm.
we'll call it, like hit the job market,
Yeah.
what were the first few years of your career like?
Well, first and foremost, I did not want to be an entrepreneur. I actually dreaded the idea of being an entrepreneur. I was like, that's not for me. I don't want to do taxes or my own taxes, business taxes, and all that. I don't want to sit there and look for clients. I don't, all the things that come with being an entrepreneur that kind of put fear in your heart, and also even like, how am I going to get clients and all these things. I was like, you know what? I'd rather just jump into the hamster wheel like everybody else and just work for a company, and that's it. I know that, a lot of my income is going to be predictable, and everything's going to work out, and benefits and all that good stuff, and taxes are way easier. um, so I never actually wanted to be an entrepreneur. So when I first started, I actually, what I was doing was just going from different jobs to job, kind of taking from those jobs and moving on to the next. So a big thing, just backtracking a little bit, in high school, I actually had, my high school ran on internships. So you're supposed to have an
Hmm.
internship every year. And
Oh,
so
wow.
once I started kind of getting away from the organic creative side of art and started going towards more like, using Photoshop and Illustrator and those sort of things, and really understanding graphic design, digital marketing, web design, I actually started doing internships related to that. So my first internship in that was working for a design studio, and I learned a lot, like so much from that internship, because the person that I had the internship from was someone that did exactly what I was doing now: photo, video, web, logos, branding kits, everything. So that's where it really started. And then from there, once I graduated, I would get these jobs. Like one job I had was working at a print shop. And so from there, I learned about, bleeds and not letting things, run off the margins, and how much spacing for everything for it to print properly. I also worked at another job. Um, I think this was like right after college, I believe, which was a packaging place that actually did packaging for places like Kohl's and Juicy Couture. And so I was able to actually do projects for those big brands, which is really awesome.
Hmm.
Um, so I just literally just learned from a lot of different jobs, and then eventually, I eventually got exposed to so much of like working behind the scenes of these like small businesses and agencies and print houses, that I realized it's not that hard. If they could do it, why can't I? And to be honest, not to pat myself on the back or anything, I felt like I could probably do this a lot better. Because I used to see like where the hiccups were in their process and their workflow, and I'd be like, man, why don't they just not do this one part, or tweak this a little bit? And that really was the bug that started to
Hmm.
grow in me to entrepreneurship eventually.
Yeah, I actually think that that's probably the factor in deciding on who's going to take that entrepreneurial leap or not, right? It's
Hmm.
not necessarily who wants to do taxes and find clients, right? Because nobody wants to, I guess, other than accountants, and
Hmm.
probably even they don't want to do taxes, right?
Yeah.
It's the people who think I can do that better, or my own version of this would be better. That is
Hmm.
kind of what drives people to take that leap. Before we talk about that leap, Melvin, would you recommend taking the same approach to other people? And by same approach, I mean graduating and, tasting a whole bunch of different, if we can go back to the dinner plate reference, like a whole bunch of different plates, work for a whole bunch of different companies, learn a whole bunch of different things? Or is that kind of more fitting to the line of work that you went down?
It depends. For me personally, my own style and my own journey, I work really well with mentors, and I work really good with people showing me how they do things, and then I can kind of take and kind of Frankenstein it to like make it be better, right? I do believe that there are some people out there that can just take the dive and just go for it, and learn, like make a bunch of mistakes and then learn from them, and then they have a thriving business. I think it's more beneficial to like first learn from the guys that are further ahead from you. So like how I did, like work for the print shop, the design house, all these different places, because then like I said before, like the mistakes that they make, and you can then not repeat those mistakes yourselves, and in turn that really saves you time, saves you
Mm-hmm.
effort, and most of all, it saves you money. From buying equipment and software and things that you really don't know how to use fully, or
Mm-hmm.
even just things in general, like a CRM. Some of them are really a lot of like thousands of dollars a year, and so things like that, if you are first able to just be a student first for a while, maybe in even a couple of years, then making that decision is like, hey, maybe now I'm ready to do that. Because
Right.
again, I think there's a lot of consequences when you jump the gun too early.
Yeah, I mean, not only does it save you money, you actually get paid to learn those lessons too, right? That's the other great
Hmm.
part is that you're
Yeah.
earning a salary to learn, which is really great. Okay, so you have all these experiences, you're starting to get that bug, right? The, this is how I would do it, I could do it
Hmm.
better. What was that like? How long did you kind of go through that phase, and then what was it like when you finally pulled the trigger and said, "All right, it's time to go out on my own"?
Well, for me, it was seeing the money come in and seeing the money come in and me not busting my hump as hard working for someone else. When it was for me, I felt like, first of all, one of the biggest attractors too was like just the freedom. Like I work on my own schedule. That right
Mm-hmm.
there was probably what kept me kind of going, like keep like investigating further on this road. But I would say, that was one thing. Also, like just the fact that my business was actually growing, even when I didn't have a formal business, but the fact that the word was getting out that Melvin does website, that he does photography, that he can help your business grow. And that to me was exciting because even when I was younger, what I something that I kind of skipped before talking about my history was that I used to get the biggest satisfaction from creating nothing or something that was just an idea, whether it's somebody else's idea or my own idea, and making it into actual like something tangible. And so even today, like running my own business, that's still my favorite part is having talking to a business owner that's going through a lot of problems and situations in their business and creating something tangible that can improve their business. And I deal a lot with websites, and I really focus on sales oriented websites that can do something or automate your business or make it run smoother. And so it just kind of kept transitioning to that. And that's really was one of the bugs that really got me going, was just like the freedom, the fact that I was actually making money and my business was growing and I was still able to create nothing out of something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, something out of nothing, like I did when it all got me started in there. And that's really what keeps me going today, is that.
Right. And but so what did that tipping point look like? Like was there a day where you quit your job? Did you start freelancing on the side and kind of transition into it, or how
Mhm.
did that go?
Yeah. So um, on a more practical level, yeah, definitely. I would go, like I mentioned before, I would work at all these different places. And then from there, I would pick up these disciplines. And with these disciplines that I would learn actually on the job, I would then apply them to actual people. I would actually look for clients or look for people, even friends, family, anybody that I knew had a business or somebody that had an idea for a business. I'd be like, hey, man, I can help you get your idea of a business off the ground. I've always been a type of person where I've always loved to help people too. And so once I learned how to make a logo in Illustrator, I was looking for everybody and their mom to make a logo in Illustrator for.
Right.
And the same thing with websites and photography and videography. I was just like so happy that I learned something that could help other people. And that's how, it was a big transitioning point. But again, to just be on a more practical level, um, eventually I just kept picking up clients little by little. And then in 2015, I actually formed my business. And from then on, I just took the leap of faith and I just did that. I picked up really what it really was for me to feel secure to like leave the 9 to 5 was the fact that I do a lot of I offer a recurring service of what I do. And so once I built up enough recurring service, that's really when I decided to leave my job, you know, and I just kept on building people on that recurring model. And then that's what keeps me away from the 9 to 5, for someone
Right.
else.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And so what would you recommend to others? Like if someone's listening right now and they're working a 9 to 5, they have a little bit of the I could do
Mhm.
it better type bug. What do you think the first maybe two or three steps should be for them? Not even necessarily, go start the business tomorrow, but like
Mhm.
what are a couple things that they could do to even just evaluate or, get the kind of ball rolling?
Yeah. Well, if you think you could do it better, I would say go and do it better.
Mm-hmm.
Go and do it better. What I mean by that is go and look for clients, go and look for people, even if it's a free job. The way that I started was doing it all for free or very, very cheap. Like I literally went from free to cheap to then just a little less cheap to like, okay, now we gaining a little more confidence now. I feel
Right.
like I'm worth my money. I'm worth the value that I give to these businesses. And so I would say that, while you're working the 9 to 5, get your name out, go to networking events, market on social media, do those little things on the side. So it's kind of a tipping point where it's like, okay, now my side gig is making more money than my full-time job. And that's when you know that it's a good safe time to go. Also
Mm-hmm.
too, like for me, I'm married, I have 2 kids, so it's a little bit harder for me because there's people that rely on me. I'm the only one that works here. Because my wife takes care of the kids, and without her, I can't work. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's very, you have to, if you're single, it's a lot easier because if you like make a mess and you just ruin everything, then you'll be fine. But with
Mm-hmm.
someone like me, I had to be very careful, and that's how I did it. I just waited until that tipping point kind of got to the point where I felt comfortable and confident that this is sustainable, for the future, for my family, for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And then when you did pull the trigger, was it as hard as you expected it to be, especially at the beginning with the clients, with the taxes? I mean, we benefit now because there's
Mhm.
so many tools, right? The QuickBooks and all this software that makes bookkeeping, accounting, a lot of that stuff easier. But what was it like for those first few months for you? Was it harder than you expected? Was it easier than you expected? It sounds like you started in a pretty good spot because you did have ongoing clients, recurring revenue. But
Mhm.
I'm always interested to hear about kind of the first 6 months when you actually pulled the trigger.
Yeah, it was definitely scary. I think when you are now thinking like, where's my next paycheck gonna come from? That puts fear, and I think most people, especially, well, if you're a young person, listen to that, you're like, yeah, whatever, mom and dad will take care of me. But if once you're like an actual adult, it's tough. Like it's frightening, especially like I mentioned before, when you have people depending on you, it's even more frightening because it's like everything's on me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it was scary. It was something that was scary. I think it should be scary. I think the things that have the best payoff are the things that are the most scary. And I just kind of, even now, I put myself in uncomfortable situations, but I learned how to like kind of be comfortable in the uncomfortable, if that makes sense you
Mm-hmm.
know and the thing is too, like, I'm such a interesting person. I always measure everything almost like, well, I'm not gonna die you know and
Yeah.
that's how I think of it. It's like, hey, if I quit my job and I do this the freelancing thing on my own, I'm not gonna die. Like, worst
Mm-hmm.
case scenario, I have a good story of how I failed or something. So I just kind of really think of it realistically, because I think sometimes in our heads we're our own biggest enemies. We think, oh,
Mm-hmm.
nobody's gonna get this from me, nobody's gonna buy that, nobody's gonna want what I have. I don't really solve a real problem, and a lot of it's in your mind. But once you actually do it, you're like, wow, it wasn't really that bad. And you kind of touched on it a little bit with like the taxes and stuff. When it comes to taxes, like, man, just get a tax person. Your own tax person can probably do your taxes for you. But for me specifically, I actually knew somebody who specializes in doing taxes for designers. So he does taxes for like videographers, photographers, interior designers, architects, like you name it, he does it. And so he actually takes care of everything for me. And I think that, those parts that kind of like intimidate you a little bit, it's a good place for maybe hiring that out and kind of delegating that to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't have to worry about taxes. My tax guy does that for me, you know? And in terms of getting clients, that's another thing that causes a lot of fear. If you work, like I mentioned before, if you're working a 9 to 5, use that time wisely to build relationships. That's one of my biggest regrets of when I was younger, was that I felt like I could have probably made more long lasting relationships that could have been beneficial to me now. And that's really, a good way to explore the business. Just focus on building relationships, and not the type of relationships where, like, where you just want something from the other person, but like real, actual business, like friendships almost.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that early, you'll be even better off once you actually get the ball rolling with your business.
Yeah, a couple of really good points there. I mean, you can't put a value on a good network when it comes to
Hmm.
business. That's definitely what I've learned. And
Yeah.
and then one of the other quotes, for those not on the Solopreneur Grind email list, I highly recommend joining. We send a quick quote Monday to Friday just to get your day started. And one that we sent this week was from a couple episodes ago where Richard Lau was saying, you want to do things that are difficult, because if they were easy, it means a whole lot of other people would be doing them. There'd be more competition, et
Hmm.
cetera, right? You want to almost kind of lean into those things that are a little bit harder, a little bit more difficult, kind of like exactly what you said, there's probably a
Hmm.
lot more on the other end once you break through that. So
Yeah, I
super
agree.
valuable lesson. So Melvin, you pull the trigger, you get started on your own. It's a little scary, but you start figuring it out. You're outsourcing the things you're not comfortable with, which I
Hmm.
think is a great strategy for everybody. And where does it go from there? Like, how was it like kind of getting into the groove, and what has it been like growing since then? And because typically what we struggle with those first couple months, some of the things we struggle with forever, right? It's you always got to be thinking about that next client, but as
Hmm.
you've become more successful, had more successful clients, how did kind of the dynamic change?
Yeah, there's a big dynamic change for me, and also I still deal with it today. And for me, what it is discipline, self-discipline. When you have like your own business, like one of the hardest hurdles is just building that discipline for yourself, like getting the work done, getting the promises fulfilled that you did for clients. Also managing your own time, managing your own to-do list of all the the stuff that has to be done, even like the smaller um, more like bullet point items for each project.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm a very transparent person, so that's really like one of my struggles is having that self discipline sometimes because again, that voice in your head or that mindset you have, it's like, oh, I'll get to it later, and then when it's like later, you're freaking out because you should have done it like days ago or weeks ago, right? So I'd say like that's probably the number one thing, that if you're not a person who's disciplined, try your best to be disciplined, whether reading books or how to become better at self discipline, or setting up some sort of system that works for you specifically to become disciplined. I would say, but that's definitely something that I think a lot of people might struggle with is self discipline. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also, to some other hurdles I'm trying to think is to be very upfront. Like if you're somebody who's always like in your shell, when you have a business, you kind of have to be out of your shell. And some examples of that is like managing leads, right? If you get somebody who's interested in your service, now you have to put on your sales hat. Some people aren't comfortable being a salesperson for their own business. And sometimes the sales conversations get really tough because some people they want to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper, and you have to be the expert and provide that answer. And sometimes you, again, the mindset wise, it's I forgot what the actual name for it. It was going around on social media. I think it's like imposter syndrome. Like sometimes we think that like we're not good enough for some reason, but you are good enough because you wouldn't be doing what you're doing if you weren't good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes, like in sales conversations, imposter syndrome will start to kind of like rise up, and you start kind of questioning yourself. It's like this person thinks I'm not a professional or an expert. So yeah, I think really the biggest hurdle overall, like I'm mentioning, the overall theme is just getting your mindset right. Like you have the skills that already qualifies you that you're good enough. That's it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now, just continue to just like work on yourself always. I think I've seen a lot of design studios go up and down due to the fact that they don't change with times as well. And also learning technologies. And so you always have to be a student, like I mentioned earlier as well. Like you have to always be learning the new technologies, learning the new softwares, the new platforms, all these different things. It's always something that's changing, especially in what I do, digital marketing and web design. It's always changing. Even right now, I'm learning a new platform as we speak because it's just that quick. And so, again, that relates to self discipline as well. If you're not disciplined to keep learning, like this is like when you're an entrepreneur, you're never really done because industries change all the time. There's new industries popping up. Look at Tesla, for example. A few years back, there was no Tesla. So now
Mm-hmm.
there's a Tesla in the market, and now you're gonna have to change how you do business because now you got Tesla as a competitor. And so these are things that are always going to be happening. And if you're not cut out to handle those mindset sort of things, then you may struggle. You know.
Yeah, those are huge points, and I definitely agree with all of them. So Melvin, let's talk about what you're the expert at, despite what your imposter syndrome might, flare up
Hmm.
and tell you once in a while, which is kind of like the web design, the media, stuff like that.
Hmm.
What would you say is like the most common service you're providing? Is it basically building websites for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I lead with website. That's my leading service is websites. And out of having a website, because the it's a little bit different than how other people do it, but really, it truly starts at like branding. But most companies who come to me, they already have the branding down packed, but it really starts at branding, because branding spills over into the website design, and the website design spills over into digital marketing. And that's what
Hmm.
people really want. So a lot of times when people come to me, they want, they want business basically. They want, tons and tons of leads in their inbox and all that stuff. But that doesn't happen if you don't have your website. And the website doesn't happen if you don't have your branding, down packed. So I lead with website design, and that's really what I do. And my focus is on creating like a sales machine website. So for example, I would ask like, what are your goals? Do you want to have a better sales process for your customer service team? Then that's what the website can facilitate and do better, or even sometimes automate for you. There's some people who want to be able to remarket, and so they want to be able to do things on their website to grab potential customers' information to remarket to them later. There's some people who want to sell just a tangible product. They want to put it somewhere where the people can just go, and that's like the central hub, right? So that's really what I lead from. It's just the website design, because even if
Hmm.
you um, like if you for example, like if you wanted, like if you did like a Facebook ad, right, but you have no website, or you have a really bad Wix template website or something, it's like, what's the point of putting that ad out and spending thousands of dollars a month?
Right.
It's really that ad is actually costing your business money. You're trying to do it so you can get more money, but it's actually costing you money you know so
Hmm.
my main core service is web design.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. What would be some pieces of advice? I quickly want to touch on branding for two reasons. One, I think it's really important, as you said, it's the starting point to those other assets. And
Hmm.
secondly, because I don't have a design or branding bone in my body. So, what would you suggest? Let's say you were talking to a potential client or a client and they didn't have branding figured out. Do
Hmm.
you have like two or three pieces of advice for them on how to get started down that path?
Yeah, a lot of people, they make decisions based on like how they feel and emotions, and so that's really where branding comes in. It kind of satisfies that emotional part of people when they choose a product or service versus another. Also, too, logos and just having like an entire brand kit and a brand identity created, it kind of makes it a lot easier when you're designing everything else. It's all consistent. There's been many times where I talked to like small mom and pop shops, and you would see like their sign, or like the sign that's out front of the store, and then signage that's inside the store, and then their website. It's all mixed match. It doesn't match at all. It looked like three different businesses, and it confuses the public. So having your business branded builds consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And also too, it makes you just stick out from your competitors. There's a lot of bad ugly logos out there, but if you're the one bakery or the one doctor's office or lawyer that has that nice shiny logo that looks good, it builds credibility, and it just makes you stand out from the rest of the other guys who just didn't care or take the time to do their branding. And it makes it a lot easier. Also, I had this little fourth point. When you get products done, if you get a pen done, if you get a hat done, if you get a shirt done with embroidery or flyers or brochure, it all looks how it's supposed to. The branding kit covers all of those different scenarios where your logo will be placed on. So that's really why branding is crucial. It's
Mm-hmm.
because you don't want to pay for a web designer, pay for videos and ads, and then realize, oh man, my branding, I need to like sparse it up a little bit. I need to like fix it up a little, because now you're going backwards when you should have just done it in the beginning. You have it done and over with, so you can move on to the other parts.
Right. Yeah, no, solid suggestions. And so when it comes to websites,
Mm-hmm.
what are the biggest struggles, or we'll call them weaknesses or problems that you see with clients' websites that you find yourself, having to fix or do over
Mm-hmm.
or start from scratch? Like, what are most people getting wrong with their websites?
Yeah. All right. This is such
Or
a
is that
funny.
a long list?
I laugh because it's like there's a lot, right? And
Right.
there's also like, if I would just pinpoint one, the number one thing would be people just don't know how to speak to their audience. They don't know how to speak to their customer. And I have this, I don't know if I made this quote, but I'll gladly take the credit if I did, that if you're speaking to everybody, you're speaking to no one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that a lot of times people, business owners, they either do like a hack job on their website, putting it together, saving a couple of dollars, or so they think they're saving a lot of dollars by making their own website, like on Wix or something, or buying a template on WordPress or ThemeForce or something, and putting it together for themselves. But really, first of all, it's costing you money because you're doing your website yourself. You're not an expert at what you do. Well, you're an expert at what you do, but communicating that in a way that your customers will understand it and the behaviors of the web, that's where the disconnect is. And so I would say that like the number one thing is just defining an audience for the website. That's the biggest problem, because a lot of times what business owners would do when they either hire somebody that's kind of like a rookie level designer, or they either do a website themselves, is that they just talk about how great they are,
Mm-hmm.
because that's all really they know. Like, right, like I'm a cabinet making company, so I'm gonna talk about the type of woods that we use. I'm gonna talk about the type of cabinets that we make. I'm gonna talk about the fixture, like all the little like pieces that go on it, and it's gonna be a me show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the spotlight's gonna be on me. But when the client or the potential customer goes on your website, they don't really care as much about you and how many years you have been in business. All they care about is the problem that they have, and are you the solution? And if they don't see on your website that you're the solution, they just click away and go to the other guy, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so that's the biggest problem, is understanding who are you speaking to, and in designing everything from the images, from the design itself, from the content, the verbiage, everything has to speak to that direct audience. And you don't have to just pick one person. You can pick one, two, or three. But the thing that I'm trying to stress here is that you have to understand who are you speaking to, and then communicating that effectively through the website. That's the
Got it.
biggest problem I see.
Yeah, and we probably all see it, right? When you go on certain websites
Mhm.
each week. I mean, I've seen my fair share of websites that just it's I, kind of like what you said. Do you have any suggestions in terms of like an exercise or a resource that someone could use to figure that out? Like a questionnaire or a specific, do you ask yourself a certain question or two to kind of figure that out and actually come up with the language?
Yeah, so um, the best thing to do, honestly, is like to get connect with somebody who does like websites and does them really well, maybe, and just see if they would evaluate website for you. Me personally, I actually offer free. Sorry, I'm like butchering my words. I offer free strategy sessions, like completely free, where I literally do that. I will go through your website and comb through it and say like exactly what we're talking about here. That this website isn't really solving a problem, and if it does, you're not conveying it properly on your site.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just literally do like a screen record video going through your website and then handing it over to you, the screen recorded video. And you can either use that, if you know how, if you feel confident and tweaking your own website, or handing off to somebody you feel comfortable with, or even hiring me to do it. That's what those strategy sessions are for. But regardless, though, I think that you should go to somebody who's a professional and have them look at it, because they will tell you these things, right from the get go. The other thing too is just take a glance at your website and just scan through it, the verbiage and everything, and then go to someone else's that's like the leader in your industry, or even in your area, and see how their website stacks against yours. And if you notice the real good websites, even if you look at a lot of these corporate websites, like can't really well, like for example, like the Apple website, right? Let's say you sell computers, right? And then you go on the Apple website, what's the difference between your computer website and Apple, you know? And I would almost guarantee too that the verbiage that Apple uses is a lot different than your mom and pop computer, selling website, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would do, is go to somebody who knows about that, and get their opinion on it. It's a funny story too, that I actually, when it comes to like testing out websites, I actually get my 11-year-old son to before I launch the website, I have him actually go on the website, and I ask him like to do certain things, like find the contact page, or find out
Right.
when this person was born on their bio page or something. And if he can't do it, then the website has failed, you
Right.
know? And so even that you could do at home, if you are a grandma or not toddler, but like somebody
Mm-hmm.
younger that can go through your website and just tell them to do simple things. If they cannot do the simple things, then you need a website for designer, most likely.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, they say that the average, North American reads at like the sixth grade level. So that all
Mm-hmm.
kind of copy, whether it be website, Facebook ads, etc., should all be with
Mm-hmm.
that in mind, right? Shorten the words, shorten the sentences, keep it
Yes.
super simple. Yeah, if a kid can't find the sales page, maybe your target audience can't either.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great, Melvin. So let's talk quickly about kind of the other primary services, or maybe not primary, kind of secondary services that you tend to help people with a little bit beyond just the website. So let's say a client comes in, you redo the website, they're happy with that. They're like, Melvin, we want to improve some of the other stuff.
Hmm.
What tends to be the most common stuff that they then need help from you for? And again, similar questions like what are a lot of people struggling with, and what do you recommend that they can do to improve?
Hmm. I think honestly, besides the website design, the second, well, it kind of goes hand in hand is like the branding, website design, and also just overall strategy. Because I feel like every time I talk to like a mom and pop store owner or a small business owner in general, I feel like they just are lost. Like I don't understand this space. I don't understand digital marketing. I don't understand nothing about websites or anything like this. And I think strategy is really like, I know it's not like a tangible thing like a video or photography or anything, but I really do think that that's up there in terms of services. It's just being able to sit down, have a conversation about, okay, what do you want your website to do, or what are you trying to do internally? What are your internal initiatives within your company that are just kind of not as smooth as you want them to be, or what's the
Mm-hmm.
current problem, and kind of seeing how everything can intertwine to solve that. And so when I have a lot of those strategy session conversations, we'll kind of realize like, hey, you need a video because there's no pictures of you guys or videos explaining of what you guys do and how you do it, you know? And now in 2020, video is everything. People don't really
Mm-hmm.
read as much as they used to. So video and images are really important. So that's kind of how I bring in those little other services like video and photo and content writing and blog writing and all that is just through strategy. So strategy is like number one, really.
Hmm.
And a lot of people appreciate strategy so much because it's like, wow, I didn't even know I had this problem over here because I was focused over here, you know? And so having somebody come in and look at your business unbiasedly really
Mm-hmm.
is something huge for business owners. It's really that light bulb moment almost, you
Yeah,
know?
and it kind of goes back to when you were talking about the difficulties of entrepreneurship, right? Like you have to be disciplined, and part of that too is knowing what to even do with that discipline, right? Like we
Hmm.
could, as an entrepreneur, solopreneur, it's a unique spot where you wake up and technically like there's a blank slate right in front of you. Like how are you going
Yeah.
to spend the 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, however many it is, doing your work? And especially when it's you working on that business day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, you can kind of get lost in the weeds of the business. So there's a lot of value in an outsider coming in and
Hmm.
saying, hey, what the, you're going in the wrong direction, or what is the direction that you're going in here because you don't seem to have one.
Hmm.
Um, so, any other suggestions in terms of how you help entrepreneurs kind of set or stay on that direct path, or is that very much case to case basis, or do you see kind of like common, you know, issues that the same solopreneurs are coming upon?
Yeah, I think the number one problem, just like really like zooming out from everything, is you have to invest in yourself. No one's gonna do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely nobody, right? And you got to invest in your own education, like I mentioned before, because things change quick. No matter what industry you're in, things change. In
Mm-hmm.
2020. So invest in yourself in terms of education. Invest in yourself in terms of technology. Invest in yourself in terms of making processes smoother, whether it's getting a CRM or hiring out somebody to handle that particular task for you. Because it will pay off. I promise you, it will pay off if you are able to invest in yourself. Because nobody's gonna do it for you. A lot of times when I was starting out, there were people who, for a logo, they didn't really understand why they needed a logo, and they wanted like the cheapest price. That was like what led their choice, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
later on, they would come back to me saying, "Hey, no, we want you to design the logo. We're gonna pay whatever it is." We went with the other guy who was charging like $5 or whatever,
Mm-hmm. The
and
Fiverr.com. Yeah.
exactly. And we learned like we should have just went with you because it was such a pain. We had to go through so many revisions and all that. So that's an example of like what I see a lot. And if it's something important, your business should be important to you. And if it's important to you, then you should invest into it. The same way that you invest in like eating good food and all, having a nice car, if you're
Mm-hmm.
lucky to have a nice car. Invest in your business because your business really is like a fountain. The more you invest in it, the more it's gonna give water to everything else. And
Right.
so really financially and mentally investing into your business.
for sure. The old adage, you get what you pay for. Usually
Yeah.
learn that the hard way in business.
Yeah. You want to almost believe that that's not true, but it is, man. It is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Cool, Melvin. So, kind of my last question here is, when you say invest in yourself, I totally agree, super important. What are the ways that you find have worked best to invest in yourself? Is it reading? Is it taking online courses, seminars? And then maybe if you could suggest one or two, books, courses, or something that you've really gotten a lot of value from.
Yeah, so I invest in myself. To be honest, I buy a lot of online classes. So that's one way that I do it. The other way is a lot of YouTube consumption.
Hmm.
My wife, it's funny because like you would think that like you're on YouTube, you're just watching like funny cat videos or something. But no, I learned a lot off of YouTube.
Yeah, there's a ton of
Um,
value there for sure.
yeah, I even like having a Skillshare account. I have a Blinkist account. I don't know if you're familiar with Blinkist. It's
That's the
basically like,
audio books.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
audiobooks, but it gives you like the gist of what the book is. If you're somebody who doesn't have time to read books, it gives you the gist. And I also have an Audible account, and I'm always just reading books constantly. And I usually try to read books in whatever I feel like I'm struggling in at that moment. So
Hmm.
if I feel like I don't have a lot of balance, like I'm kind of dropping the ball with family and putting kind of like the business stuff up, on a pedestal, I'll
Hmm.
read books in relation to that. If I am going through bad project management time or something, then I'll read books on that. But I always equip myself in those areas where I'm weak in, and I do it a lot through just online research, really.
Hmm.
I almost think to myself, like, was it worth it going to college for this? Because everything's so much just out there, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole episode on that topic right there, but I totally relate. I think it was like a year or two ago where I kind of shifted to more of that focus. And I think it was from a podcast that I was listening to from Tim Ferriss where he was talking about just-in-time learning, which I'd never
Hmm.
thought about, right? Because I had kind of just, I love to read, so I'm always reading something, sometimes
Hmm.
fiction, sometimes business,
Hmm.
different topics of business biographies. But sometimes I would read a book and it wouldn't really be that applicable that month.
Hmm.
So instead, kind of taking like just-in-time delivery, like like the Walmart and all the business models, started doing just-in-time reading, which is focusing on the books and topics that I'm most struggling with, exactly like
Yeah,
you said, which has been super helpful.
yeah.
Awesome, Melvin. Well, this has been really great hearing more about your stories, hearing about your suggestions, how to stay focused, how to keep learning. If people are interested in learning more about you or your company, where would you suggest that they check you out?
Yeah, the number one would be at my website, which is mellowmultimedia.com. And mellow is Mello, and then multimedia.com. And also, you can check me out on LinkedIn. You can just type in my name, Melvin Figueroa, and I'm sure I'll pop up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Melvin, thanks again for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.